Hey, everybody. Welcome to our next episode of The Main Scoop. Good to see you again, Daniel. It's been a while.
It is good. It's great to be back here. Both of us probably on the road like crazy because we love to do these every chance we get when we're together. And I think we're going to get together again in the near future. But
We
also
are,
good to
but we
be
mix it up. We mix it up
also
for
good to
sure.
be at my desk for once. It's been a crazy, this the speed of innovation right now, the news cycle with AI. I'm telling you, Greg, I have never seen like the world move as fast as it moves every single day right now. It
Yeah.
feels like there's some big thing that breaks. And when I say break, I'm not talking about outages in the cloud. Those are only occasional. I'm talking about break, like some new 50 billion, $100 billion investment, some new $1 trillion market number comes out. But it's been great. I mean, heck, every day I wake up excited right now.
Well, I think that's one of the really fun things about the whole IT landscape, right? There's always something new and different going on because we always want to be more effective and efficient and drive greater value to the organizations that we work with. But I think what we're going to do this time is kind of broaden it out a bit more. We've talked about a lot of different things. We've talked about new innovations in IT, from machine learning to AI and much, much more. But I don't think we've ever focused on what can we learn from where we've been, right? I mean, we've gone through these cycles. The technologies have been different. We've figured out how to work with them, get the most out of them, how to connect them to other things. But I don't think we've talked about that specifically as a topic. And I think that'll be a fun conversation.
And maybe even a little bit of where we've been is sort of creating this where we're going. And then what parts of where we've been, which is something we do talk about a lot, continue to be critical to where we're going. And then, of course, what did we learn? Like, what have we learned in these innovation cycles? I mean, hey, heck, they say that this cycle, this AI cycle, is something like 7 times faster than the internet. 7 times is one of the numbers being thrown around. I tell you, by how I feel waking up every day, it feels like 70 times faster. But
Yeah.
it's moving really quick. And I think we have a great guest today.
We do for sure. Our guest today has an extensive career in understanding infrastructure challenges. She's been in the space for years, can apply lessons learned from past innovations to today's new wave of IT trends. So let's pull in Ellen here. Ellen, can you share a bit about your work and what drew you to kind of this side of looking at innovation in the ecosystem?
For sure. All right. Hi guys. Thank you very much for inviting me. And I'm always up for talking about infrastructure, especially when my kids aren't here to roll their eyes and be like, "Oh my God, it's so boring." And I'm like, "No, no, it's so exciting." And now it's even more exciting.
Our kids don't always think what we think is exciting,
Well,
but I think
by
there's a little bit
definition.
of a vice versa there too.
Well, Ellen, 6 years ago, I was talking to a media outlet that told me they no longer want to really write about semiconductors because it's not
Well, there you
interesting
go.
anymore. Just telling you like how fast things can change.
I'll be brief about myself, and then I know we want to kind of get right into it. So, I am a three-time founder CEO. I've been in, entrepreneurship and innovation for my whole career, and I've spent pretty much all of it in the enterprise infrastructure spaces. And kind of not exactly, there's an older story we can get to in terms of how did that happen and why did I end up there. But long story short, I kind of feel like I started my meaningful career at a company in the data warehousing space called Netiza, and this was pre-cloud, and that was all about huge data management issues and being able to do analytics and faster and with greater cost efficiency and just dealing with all sorts of issues that were big data problems. And then from there, I went off and I started my own companies, and I've been doing that ever since. Initially, in the very beginning of cloud computing and dealing with hybrid cloud, and so cloud infrastructure as it was just getting started, really when it was Amazon and it was Amazon, and like before the other clouds really took off. And so I can tell you more about that if that's interesting. That company was acquired by Verizon, so I got to be in like the networking world.
Well,
And then after that, I got all excited about latency as a problem. So I was dealing with hybrid cloud storage. at the edge and dealing with issues of, kind of dealing with the cloud together with more of an on-prem environment. So that was all going on. That company was acquired by AWS. I worked for AWS for a while in their hybrid cloud storage services, and saw what life is like inside the big tech machine. More recently, about a year ago, I switched to the venture side. So I have that perspective as well. So I am an operating partner at Glasswing Ventures, which is a seed stage venture firm in the Boston area. We just announced our Fund 3, it's a $200 million fund. And we invest only, and have only ever invested in AI and cyber. So I kind of get my fix on things that are a little more infrastructure-y on the cyber side. And then on the AI side, a lot of it is more business specific, more at the application layer, although we deal with data pipeline issues and other stuff as well. So it's a really great mix. And I kind of get to see now this latest generation. So let me pause there, happy to answer questions. But
I think it's a remarkable path. And I was looking at your background, and obviously I didn't look back far enough. I didn't realize we had the overlap with Netezza. I started my career in information management, largely around applications, and then went into software. And I was in the division at IBM when we acquired Netezza,
Oh
running
my
the
goodness.
warehouse.
Oh my goodness.
So
I should have looked at your LinkedIn more carefully, right? Yeah, that's
that's
cool.
pretty funny. So
That's cool.
I think we can have a lot of fun, and I love hearing your background of looking at, the whole IT space from a bunch of different perspectives. And I think that's what gives us clarity.
So I got to ask you before, we dig in any further. You founded companies, you exited to some very well-known companies. Was it you kind of felt like you hit that point in your career where you maybe not time to launch and operate, and maybe take a step back and take all that you've learned operating, because like I've always said, like I meet a lot of people that are in venture and PE that haven't ever operated. And it's really interesting when they come into your boardroom or in your meetings and try to tell you what to do. But you've got this really unique perspective because you're like, I've done this, I've been through this, whether it's raising, whether it's building, whether it's scaling. I mean, was it just kind of you're at this point where you're like, I've got a lot to teach, a lot to pass on?
Right. So it's always a, debate in my head, which is, in my soul, I am a founder builder, right? That's what I do. I love the operator side of things. And, I've done it now several times, and I have been through an IPO and 2 acquisitions, right? So like, I've definitely seen a lot of things, good, bad, very bad, ugly, wonderful, I've seen the full range. And so I love that journey. Along the way, just because you do, I got very involved in the Boston tech community, and in particular working with other women founders and women operators. And so I've spent a lot of time now for it's more than a decade. I think it's maybe closer to 2 decades, where I've done like advisory, and I've been an investor, and I had gotten involved in some of the early stage venture firms here, including Glasswing. Like I kind of had been doing that in the background. I've been on boards. So like, part of me is like, I love that because that's it feels like, interesting and engaging and giving back and, building the community here and all that kind of stuff. But then there's the other side of it, of course, where you say like, no, but I want to go do that next thing. And you never know, right? I mean, you never know where things will head, but I definitely had reached the point where I was starting to feel like it was a good time to start to shift the balance more towards that side of it.
Yeah. Well, you wake up every day is kind of a new problem, not to say that when you're in a founding role, you don't have that, but it's kind of different because you're not only same problems, same company, different problems. Now you got many companies, many problems, many things to work on. So that's a lot of fun. This show's called The Main Scoop. We focus a lot here on infrastructure. We talk a lot about the mainframe here. And so, I do want to get your take, having the history you have to have a bit of an outlook. Infrastructure's changing, IT innovation is happening at breakneck pace, but the mainframe is still very important fundamentally to so many different workloads, applications, in the industry as a whole. What's your sort of take on the role of the mainframe in this shifting infrastructure landscape?
My feeling about it a little bit was, what's that quote? It's like the rumors of the mainframe's demise are premature or something like that. Like every time there's a major technology trend, people say, okay, that's the end of the mainframe, right? Like we're done with that. And how are those things still even in running and stuff like that? But I deal with enterprises. My whole career has been with, medium up to large and huge enterprises, and they got mainframes and they are not giving them up. We used to joke that it was like, out of my cold, dead hands, will you get my mainframe? Like there's that level of intensity and, importance, right? System of records and, like just, and frankly, how well they have performed and held up for so many decades. So, like when we went to the cloud, there was all this discussion about, cloud migration from the mainframes and how was that going to work and whether people were going to do it and were they going to lift and shift and were they going to, modernize their workloads and stuff like that. And I think to some extent, you guys may disagree with me, it a little got walled off where it was like, we got all these greenfield things and we have other things that are a little more like virtualized and cloud ready that we're ready to go. And let's go do those things in all of our net new applications. And we're going to keep some of these other systems. And, I lived in hybrid cloud my whole career. So it's kind of like, it's okay to have things in different environments based on what's appropriate. But there was some aspect of that. Now, fast forward to AI, where there's like, okay, we want the mainframe still as a platform, but we need it to be available to AI workloads, and we need it to be integrated in with other things that we're doing that could be living, that are certainly living in the cloud, most of them, but also could be living in other types of environments, given how difficult it is to put your AI workloads, in the right place at the right cost with the right performance. There are all these issues that I'm sure we'll talk more about. So what I've been seeing is that there are both big companies, which you guys probably know a lot about, and also startups that come pitch me, and the Glasswing team about COBOL migration, modernization of mainframe environments to enable the workloads to either run in place or to be able to now actually move into the cloud and to be able to span across, multiple environments, and being able to automate it, but also being able to enable a lot of the provability that the workloads will run appropriately once they have been either modernized and or migrated. And so that's a lot of the stuff that I'm seeing. And I think that those are things that are clearly underway and people are believing is going to take place, which is great because basically that allows kind of this whole next generation of technology. So I'm sure you guys have other things you want to add about that, but that's what I'm seeing. Like, ironically, I see people pitching me not just about apps and all sorts of other stuff, but they're also doing this specific type of mainframe related workload because it's just so critical to a lot of the businesses.
And I love the way you said that. You started with talking about connected, but the word I picked up the most on was the idea of integrated, right? Because it's not just about connecting to access, pulling data from here, there, or wherever, mainframe or somewhere else. It is about the integration of these technologies where I think that's where the biggest magic happens when you're using the strengths of each of these things orchestrated or coordinated together versus little silos or repositories or pulling from here and aggregating somewhere else. And I think that was the challenge. I agree with you. Initially, when people were talking about the cloud era, it was one or the other. It was a lift and a shift, and then it was a how do I connect and get what I need, but do everything else here, there, or somewhere else. And it's absolutely evolved into an integration. So I'm curious, if you look at the infrastructure space today, and you look at you talked a little bit about the journey to cloud, but what do you think are kind of the biggest challenges today, and how are they evolving, or are we just kind of really learning the same lessons over and over and having to figure out how to integrate things?
Right. Like sometimes when I'm as old as Daniel, you and I both are, I feel that like it's like the same movie again and again, except that it's not exactly the same movie, right? We know this. So of course, today we have massive data center power and growth, supply demand issues that are just overwhelming. And then of course there's access to GPUs and all the chip issues. So we've got that going on. And those are, I don't want to say unprecedented because of course we had times before where, there were these surges of growth, but at like 7 times the speed of a previous innovation wave, this is more like a tsunami, right? So like everyone's just scrambling and running around. So we'll just put that to the side. That's one whole, I'm sure, longer discussion we could have. But then when I think about what the other problems are and what I see in terms of the companies that are building new technology that are more infrastructure related, there really takes on the old things. So what are the things that have always been problems, right? There's scalability, performance, there's latency, there's cost, right? There's optimization of cost performance, right? We got all of those types of issues. And, then you've got the whole security and compliance side of things, which now has a whole new, range of opportunities of scary, malicious things that can happen that are not out of our wildest imagination, but they're beyond the things that we have already instrumented. So we've got all of those things going on. And those are all old things, right? Those are things that we've had to deal with before. It's the pace of the innovation that's happening and how fast enterprises are adopting these technologies and going full speed ahead. They've moved through that whole cycle that I've lived through now a couple of times of like, oh, we're going to have a little team that's just going to work on something. And they're like the Skunk Works team and they're going to go do things. And two, it starts to spread across the organization. And then, the CIO gets crazed and everybody's screaming about, all the risks and all that kind of stuff. Like that collapsed into like a year, right? And then we're already into the business units are running these operations. Some of them are still in pilots, but a lot of them are actually building their own AI agents and thinking about how they're going to run things in more of an autonomous way. And they're doing it relying again on the infrastructure to be available to them and to support them. And so that's a huge pressure. And inevitably, like I'm always engaged with the CIO and the engineering and IT teams. Like that's very frequently where I've kind of spend my time and my efforts building my companies. And you gotta have some, I want to say, empathy with them, right? In terms of the pressure that they're under to ship code faster, to speed up, to with fewer people, let's go, all that kind of stuff, but without creating risk to the business that could be quite substantial.
Well, there's a lot of similarities that you can map to each generation of infrastructure, and then there's obviously a lot of differences. And of course, you sort of use the word tsunami. I've talked to countless, both enterprises and CEOs and investors right now. And most of them, continue to talk about, they use the word insatiable demand. We've got this word that gets thrown around a lot about a bubble. I've never seen it really be a bubble when you have constrained supply and unlimited demand. Now, at some point, could we build too much? Could we have too much? Yes, that is absolutely possible. But I think when you literally can't get a turbine right now to build a data center for 5 years, I think we've got a window of time where we're going to build this stuff. But like, besides that sort of breakneck pace, is there anything from those sort of earlier generations that you're seeing that we can learn from? Like, how do we avoid sort of underestimating the complexity and getting ourselves too modern at this pace? Because that's the one thing, like, I think AI seems to do much better than us as humans. Like, we tend to stick our, claws in with how it's always been, Ellen. We don't want to change. I see it a lot, like with I call it the cult of I'm a certified something, meaning I am a certified on one platform and I will resist Claude Code, or I will resist, like, how do we make sure we don't do that? Because that's what I think the biggest risk to enterprise is right now.
Yeah, I do see that as well. Like there's on the engineering side, there are the developers who have spent a lot of time, and this is equally true on the IT side as well. But there's a lot of like, I've built my career on understanding certain platforms, certain processes. I built those processes. I know they work. And now you're asking me essentially to learn a whole bunch of new skills and also throw out a lot of the stuff that I built before because it's too manual and requires too many people to maintain and manage it versus things that we might be able to do in the future. And that's a lot. Again, I have empathy with that issue, but on the other hand, it's kind of like, but that's where we are, so we gotta move forward. When I think about the like what do I see the companies having learned, right? In terms of this new wave of adoption, like there are all these potential roadblocks or things that might be, slow down or whatever. But in terms of the things that I'm seeing that are different this time, one is that the people who are building and adopting AI native technology are very sensitive to this issue of integration, Greg, that you were talking about, and the fact that a lot of them got really hosed where they built all of these siloed systems and then they found out that people used to say to me, like, I have copies of my data all over the place in like 10 different environments because every time we need to do stuff, we don't want to move the data around, right? Better not to move the data around. But like on the other hand, what are we supposed to do? And all these big data lake projects that got done and stuff like that. So people are very sensitive to that now. And they're thinking right up front about where are we, we have to train these models. Where are we going to train them? Where's that data going to come from? How are we going to protect it and make sure that we're not making anything available just generally out to the internet or to these, to other customers and stuff like that? What do we do about that? And so they're being more, I would say, mindful of that right up front. And then they're also, I think, trying to come up with metrics of success for some of the pilots and the testing that they're doing. Because as you may recall, back in earlier waves of technology, it was just like throw it against the wall, see what sticks. 10 different people were doing stuff they didn't even know about it. We used to talk about shadow IT. We used to talk about, all of these like people gone rogue and stuff like that. And that was part of the adoption, but it also was part of the resistance, right? Like, oh my God, we've created a mess here. Like a lot of the regulated industry companies that I talk to who are adopting AI, they are adopting AI and they're doing it under a lot of urgency that they feel that they need to do it. But they're saying, we know that there's a chance that AI could actually break our compliance, and we might not even be aware of it, right? Like we had processes that would try
Right.
to make sure that we stayed in compliance because we knew what those processes were. But now there are all these like, who even knows? So they're trying to think about a lot of those risks and security things up front. And I feel like there's a lot of mindfulness to it.
I want to make sure I've heard what you've been saying because I very much believe it if we're kind of on the same page here. You were talking about how much faster everything's coming at us, but fundamentally, the things that we need to care about in IT haven't changed. Resiliency, security, and stuff like that. So I think about that as, you look at our educational system or you look at what we learned when we were in school versus what our kids learned. The subjects haven't changed. You still do math, you still do social studies, English, grammar, all this kind of stuff, but you're learning in elementary school, but what me maybe learned in middle school or in high school. And there's more to learn. There's more history. There's what we've lived in the last 40, 50 years, which is now history. So the subjects stay the same, but the intensity, the amount of information, how fast it's flowing at you, and your ability to apply it and integrate it with other things, that's what continues to expand. And I think that ties in nicely with what Daniel was talking about relative to certifications. Because everything is always changing, because technology tends to be additive, I think that's why Daniel and I both viscerally react to somebody who just says, I'm a certified X, Y, or Z. The organizations and the people that are successful are the ones that have fundamental core technological skill, that don't trap themselves in a technology for a technology's sake, but they actually use the various technologies out there and can learn and know, hey, it may be a different language, it may be a different platform, I may have to interact or connect this differently, but I know the things I want to get done. Then I hear the new things and the new capabilities. And when we reinvent our processes around technology and the power of it versus just redoing what we've done, that's when it all unleashes. And I think that's kind of what you've been talking about and adding in, Daniel, with the certification, right?
Yeah, I mean, my read on it was that right now, there was people that for a decade or more, I mean, you kind of had the Cisco era, you had the VMware era, you had the AWS era, where people were like, this is who I am. This defines me, because this is at that moment what infrastructure was sort of seen as.
Right.
It
I'm
was
a
the
this programmer or a cloud architect
and now,
or
yeah, same thing now with developers. And now basically we're seeing that, and I've had a number of developers, by the way, and you probably see some of the companies you're investing in, they come to me and they said, I am more productive than I've ever been, and like, because there's like only two. I find that it's everything now. This is just how our society is. We're always it's A or B. We've become incredibly binary in our thinking, and it's probably driven by some of the political fury that we have in the world. But it's like either I'm a programmer and AI is never going to replace me. There's that school, and then there's the I'm a programmer and I've become like 20 times more effective using AI. And I think those are the ones that are going to be most successful. And I think it's that kind of digging in or in basically embracing the future of technology. I don't know if you're seeing in your stars. I imagine the ones you're investing in are the ones that are
Sure.
saying we're 20 times more
For
productive.
sure. For sure. I feel like I keep hearing an 8x, like 4 times the productivity with half the number of people needed to build and ship and keep, rolling out new features and stuff. And, look, we'll see. But the things that are causing the productivity are good, solid, basic things that will become part of our basic hygiene, right? About prototyping and debugging and taking the product requirements and getting them into a format that then they can actually move the whole flow through more quickly. I mean, those are just like real things, right? The whole software development lifecycle has sped up. Is that inherently good and right? Who knows? Because still you have to build things that actually solve problems for customers. Like the fundamentals of like, are you solving a real problem for real customers will never go away. And, I think faster isn't always better in that case. However, when you know what it is that you want to build and you're in a competitive environment where people are building lots of new functionality, you want to be fast and you don't want to have to say, I remember the days when we used to, at Netezza, we would do like a couple of major releases a year.
Mhm.
Of course, we had hardware and firmware, so that was even more challenging. And like, the customers could maybe handle one a year. So they'd take one major release and that was it. That was the pace we were on, right? And so, you compare that to now, like when I was at AWS, we did like 20 something releases in a year. So, it was just every couple of weeks we were rolling things out, right? It was how it
Well, and
felt.
for sure, whether you're building the right thing or the wrong thing, you don't want to take that long to figure it out, right?
Right. Worse is you roll it out and it was the wrong thing, right? And
And
it
you
took you
took 2
six
years to
months,
do it.
right? Yeah, that's
Yeah.
ridiculous. So I don't know if that's the direction you guys are going in, but just the cultural issues, like Daniel, that you were talking about, like even for companies that are not big, large enterprisey kinds of companies, even for smaller companies, you have people who got trained and are certified and have the things that they do. And in many cases, in a smaller organization, they built the platform engineering and they built the release cycles and how they deal with it and how they support the application guys and all that kind of stuff. They're doing all those things. And they deal now with in terms of like, where's our infrastructure going to run and which cloud or multiple clouds likely are we using and all that kind of stuff. So there are all these people who are handling all of those issues. And there is resistance, right? There is some resistance. But I think what you're seeing is that some of them, like what I heard from, we had a gathering of our portfolio companies and all of their, kind of technology leadership. And they were talking about the fact that sometimes somebody younger would come in and they would start to just do something and show like, oh, I was able to do this project and I did it myself in like, a couple of minutes, hours, whatever it is, some
And then you
ridiculous
go,
amount of time. And right. And the rest of the team was like, huh, okay. All right, I'm in. Let's maybe I won't use it for everything, but I'm going to start using some of this new technology right away. Because to your point, I have to, like, to be excellent in my field, I have to do this.
Yeah, I feel like we've entered the era though where it kind of used to be you could do something well or you could do something fast, but it was rarely both. And I still get that from some of, in the organization, you sort of have people that are on the front edge of like, how do we do well and fast at the same time? And then you got the people that kind of still, like I said, there's so much cultural here that's going on. But I do want to ask you, I was going through your portfolio companies. It looks like the kind of companies that you're investing in and, you know, being early stage, founder led, that seems to be your sort of ethos and thesis in the in your investment
That's right.
strategy. It looks like there are companies that are kind of doing a lot of vertical things. Maybe it's pharmaceutical work. Maybe it is FP&A, building tools that help companies improve FP&A. Like where are you? I'm super interested because when you get the resistance right now, it's everybody kind of likens AI to a chat bot. Okay. That's like, okay, so how many people are using Chat GPT and willing to pay for it? And that's supposedly the value of AI. And when you look at it, it's like, first of all, the enterprises have been using AI for decades in different ways, like machine learning, algorithms, analytics, things that AI have been helping with. Of course, now you've got a lot more autonomy. You've got a lot more, ability to generate, whether it's code, generate text, generate outputs, assets, insights. But like, where are you sort of seeing translation? Because in all these different fields, this is where enterprise AI gets real. Like, hey, we're doing drug discovery. Hey, we've
Yes.
enabled a company to eliminate 80% of cost of finance or get their financials out within 10 days instead of 30 days or things like that. Like, is it happening and are people paying? Like, are you seeing this turn to revenue?
Yeah. Okay. So this is part of what's a little fun for me and also different from previous lives. So first, let me, kind of just agree with some of the things that you said already in terms of the portfolio and, so the founders of Glasswing make the joke that like AI is the revolution 80 years in the making, right? Because if you think about AI, like it was already happening back kind of World War II, right? Like 1950s, there was all sorts of stuff going on. There was another big heyday in the 80s. I'm sure you guys remember. And then, like there's another one. So it's been multiple, at least three multiple, maybe more multiple waves of this technology.
We
And when
had
I
expert systems in the 80s, right? Remember expert systems, knowledge-based
totally,
systems, all that.
right.
That was AI of the day.
Right. And it was, I mean, there was a lot of value in some of those things. It was more that it didn't catch the world's imagination in any meaningful way, the way this wave has, right? This is like a totally different experience. So I guess I would say that the things that we're seeing are very much to your point around they are very clear, specific business problems that need to be solved, sometimes for specific industries. They can be more horizontal, but they often have a particular set of verticals that are most relevant for them. So you mentioned, pharmacy. So our company, Acepha, we've all been to the pharmacy, right? So we know what it is to go stand in line and they have the wrong thing. And then the pharmacists are like overwhelmed and running around with their hair on fire. And, you're like, it's not a happy experience many times. So the founder there, who is herself trained as a pharmacist, created a business that is totally based on, the AI data that's relevant and necessary here for this particular industry. And essentially it's for pharmacy chains where the back office operational stuff all the way through, serving the customer experience, but through billing, right? And making sure that the right, medications are where they're supposed to be and all that kind of stuff. That's all streamlined and automated and much more accurate, right? And relieves the pressure on some of the teams that are so overworked in these locations. So that, like, when I look at that, that's like a good example to me of more of a verticalized type of an approach. And also the fact that what happens in that situation is the customers who are the prospective customers of these startups, selling into enterprise, I've spent my whole career selling into enterprise. And there are things that are difficult to just become an approved vendor, to get through their security reviews, to be in their procurement system, and then to just push the whole thing through the whole cycle, even when somebody is like a champion and has budget and all that kind of stuff. Here, what we're seeing for a lot of the companies that we're investing in at this early stage is they have revenue right away, right? They're already, hundreds of thousands of dollars of ARR up into, low millions of ARR. And that was not true in the previous waves of companies.
I'd like to kind of pull this all together from it. You've got three massive successes. You've exited to the world's, some of the world's most respected companies in their fields. At the time, it sounds like you went to Verizon. That was the rage, right? That was the time when it was all about mobile and networks. And then you went to AWS when it was all about cloud. And, now you're building things. How do you sort of see this pace accelerating? And how do you sort of see us being able to, as a society, because this is probably the one thing, and this is a little big for our show, Greg, I'm going to be candid, we like to get nerdy here, and this is a little more, I guess you call it philosophical, but I think all three of us have agreed on this show. We've never seen anything like it. We've never seen a pace like this of change, but we also agree that there is a lot to be learned from each generation that has come before it. Like, what do you sort of recommend out there to the people in technology, whether they're the people that are still, building and making sure these mainframes run every transaction that, every one of these transactions that we basically do every day is probably touching a mainframe, all the way to the other end of it, to building these future-proof, AI-powered, autonomous, self-healing applications that revolutionize industries. Like, how do you kind of help the founders, help the builders, help the technologists? What kind of advice do you give to them today to be successful in the future?
I think because the technology is changing so fast at every level, right? At the core infrastructure level, and, all of the models, foundational models are changing. And then the way in which people are trying to use these things are so different. Like, it's like you're trying to build the plane while you're in the air, and, you're trying to change the engine out, right? It's like that it feels like that sometimes, I think. And so the sort of the feeling for the startup founders is that first of all, they have to build in a way that is as agnostic as possible, that the business value that they have, that they know they can solve some of these problems that we were talking about for, for companies and for, their meaningful business issues that they're trying to resolve. If you stay focused on that, but then think about how you're building your company in a way that you haven't bet too much on any one platform and you haven't bet too much on any one source of data, because you just don't know for sure how things are going to change. And be alive to, and very like fast thinking around the fact that you will have to pull in other sources of data and other teams and other usage patterns very, very quickly, and that you need to be able to handle that. And so who you hire, and like, back to your point about like, if it's someone who's like, well, I'm here because I'm the, X technology guy, as part of the team, that's probably not as useful as I tried 20 new tools this past week and I found this one was really helpful to me. And this one is like a newer thing and I'm going to switch to that now, and
Yeah.
it's kind of like a willingness. It's like an intellectual curiosity that's part of this conversation, and hiring for that.
Yeah, there's only a few of those opportunities out there, I think. Methinks there's only a few. Mark did not call me. I would consider that. Not sure.
You're like, I wouldn't rule it out if that happens,
But
right?
Mark, if you're out there,
Yeah.
Zuck, give me a call. I've got a lot of
Yeah.
ideas.
I think this has been a fabulous conversation. I took a lot away from it. I got to tell you, what I heard was, don't build isolated islands. You want a framework or a network. Generalize, what you're doing until you're driving to a specific value. So you need to be open, you need to be flexible, but always focus on what is the value you're delivering, because building technology for technology's sake doesn't get you there. So I do think there's a lot of lessons that we can learn from where we've been, and it is all about interconnectivity and integration.
Yeah, I wanted to say thanks so much. I mean, this was a lot. You covered a lot of ground and clearly have expertise sort of through generations. And it seems like a really nice way to put everything together, Ellen, to be able to put it together with that kind of deep history and understanding of where we've come from. And then, of course, being able to change. And I'd like, if I kind of have one big takeaway, it's the same thing I often say to our team is, there's a lot to learn from what's happened in the past, but there's also a lot of risk at over indexing what's happened in the past when you're kind of trying to decide how to go forward. And so it sounds like for the builders, the technologists, the founders, everyone that's out there, there's so much to learn and gain and accelerate what you're doing right now with this AI, with all the tools that are going on. But of course, so much of that core infrastructure really still does look the same, with maybe slightly different iterations of compute connectivity. Data centers are still data centers. They're a little different now, but at the same time, the kind of purpose, the build, all those things, there's a lot of commonality. But yeah, it would be great to have you come back and keep talking about this at some point. I just want to thank you so much for the time, and of course for putting up with Greg and I.
Thanks a lot, Ellen.
That's awesome. It's
We had a
totally
lot
fun.
of fun.
All right, guys. Great
Yeah.
to talk. And I love getting to hang out with people about infrastructure. So thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, well, we covered it all. So, and thank you everybody out there for being part of this episode of The Main Scoop. Hit subscribe, join us for all of our other episodes. We're always having a lot of fun here, and we hope you are too. For this episode, though, got to say goodbye. We'll see you all later.